It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the sky can't decide if it wants to rain or shine. I was on the train heading back from a job interview downtown. I'd been sitting there for about 20 minutes, lost in my thoughts about whether I'd made a good impression, when I heard someone call my name. Looking up, I saw Matt, my straight friend from college, waving at me from the other end of the train car. We hadn't seen each other in months, maybe even a year, and there he was, dressed in his typical finance bro attire. Navy blue suit, slightly loosened tie, and that expensive watch his parents had given him for graduation. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, already sliding into the seat across from me. The train lurched forward as he settled in, and just like that, our unexpected journey began. Little did we know that a simple missed stop would turn into one of those rare, unplanned adventures that reminds you why certain friendships matter so much. Matt and I had met during our sophomore year of college. We were paired as lab partners in organic chemistry, a class neither of us particularly enjoyed. I remember being a bit intimidated by him at first. He was outgoing, athletic, and seemed to know everyone on campus. Meanwhile, I was still figuring out who I was, having only recently come out. But over beakers and Bunsen burners, we discovered a shared sense of humor and an equal hatred for our professor's monotone lectures. Our friendship had always existed in this interesting space. We were different in many ways. He was straight, I was gay. He was into sports, I was into theater. He planned everything, I embraced spontaneity. Yet somehow, those differences never mattered much. There was an ease between us, a comfort that came from accepting each other exactly as we were. The train that day was unusually quiet. It was that in-between time, past the lunch rush but before the evening commute. Sunlight filtered through the windows, creating patterns on the worn blue seats. The rhythmic clacking of the train on the tracks created a soothing backdrop to our conversation. There was something almost hypnotic about it. That steady motion forward, the world outside passing by in a blur of colors and shapes. "So how have you been?" Matt asked, loosening his tie further and leaning back. "It's been what, a year?" "Almost," I replied, calculating the time since his promotion party. "Been busy with work, trying to figure out what's next. Actually just came from a job interview." "No way. How'd it go?" His genuine interest was one of the things I'd always appreciated about Matt. When he asked questions, he actually cared about the answers. I started telling him about the interview, the company culture, my hopes for this new position. The conversation flowed easily, picking up right where we'd left off months ago. That's the thing about certain friendships. Time and distance don't diminish them. They simply pause until you're together again. As we talked, I noticed Matt occasionally glancing out the window, but I didn't think much of it. We were deep in conversation about his recent breakup with his girlfriend of 3 years when suddenly his eyes widened. "Wait, was that?" He stood up abruptly, looking out the window as the train pulled away from a station. "Damn it, that was my stop." I couldn't help but laugh at the panic on his face. "Seriously? Were you not paying attention?" "I got distracted," he said, gesturing toward me with a half-smile. "Catching up and all that. I wasn't keeping track." We both looked at the electronic map above the door. The next stop was 15 minutes away, in the opposite direction of where he needed to go. "Well," I said, "you could get off at the next stop and head back." Matt checked his watch, then looked out the window at the city passing by. Something shifted in his expression, that stressed, time-conscious look softening into something more relaxed. "You know what? I don't actually have anywhere to be tonight," he said, settling back into his seat. "Let's just keep riding. See where we end up." I raised an eyebrow. "Spontaneous adventure? That doesn't sound like the Matt I know." "People change," he shrugged, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Besides, it's been too long since we really talked." And just like that, our accidental journey became intentional. There was something liberating about riding with no particular destination, no schedule to keep. The train continued its steady rhythm, carrying us further from our usual routes and routines. The train car we were in had this peculiar mix of people. There was an elderly woman knitting something that looked like a very long scarf, a teenager with headphones so loud we could hear the bass from across the aisle, and a businessman who kept falling asleep and jerking awake every time the train stopped. It felt like we were in this bubble together, all of us strangers connected by nothing more than being in the same place at the same time. Let me explain why this matters. These random moments of connection, these unplanned diversions from our daily routines, They're rare in adult life. Most days we move from point A to point B with purpose and efficiency. We have calendars and reminders and notifications constantly pulling at our attention. But there's something magical about surrendering to circumstance, about saying yes to the unexpected. As the train moved further from our familiar neighborhoods, Matt and I fell into a deeper conversation than we'd had in years. Maybe it was the liminal space of the moving train, or maybe it was simply the gift of unstructured time, but we started talking about things we usually avoided. Do you remember that night in senior year? Matt asked suddenly. When you found me sitting on the roof of the science building? I did remember. It was 3 a.m, and I'd gotten a cryptic text from him that just said, "on the roof." I'd found him there, staring at the campus below, a half-empty bottle of whiskey beside him. You were freaking out about graduation, I recalled. About not knowing what came next. He nodded, looking out the window. You know, I never thanked you properly for that night. For just sitting there with me, not trying to fix anything. That's what friends do, I said simply. Yeah, but... He hesitated. I wasn't always a good friend to you. Especially when you first came out. I said some stupid things. This was new territory for us. We'd never really talked about that awkward period when I'd first come out, and he'd pulled away slightly, unsure how to act around me. We were 19, I reminded him. Everyone says stupid things at 19. The train slowed as we approached another station. Neither of us moved to get up. Outside, the city was gradually giving way to suburbs, houses with yards replacing apartment buildings and office complexes. Still, Matt continued as the train started moving again. I've always wanted to apologize for that. I was dealing with my own stuff, trying to figure out who I was supposed to be. My dad had all these expectations. You don't have to explain, I said, but he shook his head. No, I want to. Because here's the thing. You being gay made me question a lot of what I'd been taught growing up. Not about my own sexuality, but about, I don't know, about categories. About putting people in boxes. And that was uncomfortable for me at first. I watched him struggle to find the right words, appreciating his honesty. And now, I prompted. He smiled, meeting my eyes. Now I know that some of the most important relationships in my life don't fit into neat categories. Like us. What are we? Old friends? Best friends? Something else entirely? Does it matter? Not to me, I said, and meant it. The conversation shifted then to his recent breakup. He'd been with Melissa for 3 years, had even started looking at engagement rings. But something had fell off, he explained. There was a growing distance between them that neither could quite address. I kept thinking about what my parents would say if we broke up, he admitted. They loved her. Everyone thought we were perfect together. On paper, we were. But, I prompted. But I wasn't happy, he said simply. And I kept telling myself that was selfish, that adult relationships aren't about constant happiness. They're about commitment, about building something together. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making excuses for not being able to make it work. I thought about my own dating history, a series of intense connections that burned bright and faded quickly. I think we're fed this narrative that there's one right way to do relationships. I offered. Find someone, commit forever, build a life that looks a certain way. But what if there are multiple right ways? What if what works for one person doesn't work for another? The train was now passing through an area I didn't recognize at all. The buildings were older here, with character, brick facades and fire escapes zigzagging down their sides. People walked dogs along tree-lined streets, and small shops with colorful awnings lined the main road. Where even are we? Matt wondered aloud, pressing his face closer to the window. I checked the electronic map. Looks like we're heading into Westbrook, I said, naming a neighborhood I'd heard of but never visited. Want to get off here and explore? Matt checked his watch, a habit I noticed he'd been doing less frequently as our journey continued, and nodded. Why not? We've come this far. As the train slowed, I realized how much I was enjoying this unplanned adventure. There was something freeing about being somewhere new with an old friend, with no agenda or expectations. We were just being together. The train doors opened at Westbrook Station, and we stepped out into the late afternoon sun. The air here smelled different. A hint of nearby water mixed with the scent of food from a row of restaurants across from the station. Hungry? Matt asked, nodding toward a small cafe with tables spilling onto the sidewalk. Starving, I admitted, suddenly aware that I hadn't eaten since a hurried breakfast before my interview. The cafe was called Rosemary's, and it had the comfortable feel of a place that had been there for decades. The walls were lined with black and white photographs of the neighborhood through the years, and mismatched vintage chairs surrounded wooden tables. We settled at a corner table, ordering coffee and sandwiches from a server whose arms were covered in colorful tattoos. "So," Matt said once we'd ordered, "tell me about your love life. Anyone special?" I laughed, shaking my head. "Not at the moment. Had a thing with a guy I met at a friend's gallery opening, but it fizzled out after a couple months." "What happened?" I considered the question. "Nothing dramatic. We just wanted different things. He was looking for something serious right away, and I paused, realizing something as I said it. "I think I'm still figuring out what I want." Matt nodded thoughtfully. "Isn't that the eternal question? What do we actually want versus what we think we should want?" Our food arrived, massive sandwiches on freshly baked bread, with a side of crispy fries that we immediately started sharing. There was something so comfortable about sitting there with Matt, in a neighborhood neither of us knew, talking about the big questions in life between bites of food. "You know what I've been thinking about lately?" I said, dipping a fry in ketchup. "How much of our lives is spent trying to get somewhere else? Like, I'm always working toward the next thing, a better job, a nicer apartment, a more fulfilling relationship. Always looking ahead and missing the present." Matt suggested. "Exactly. Like today. If you hadn't missed your stop, if we'd just said a quick hello and gone our separate ways, we would have missed this." I gestured around us. At the cafe, at our impromptu adventure. Matt was quiet for a moment, considering. "I've been doing that a lot, I think. Missing the present. With Melissa, I was always thinking about the future, where we'd live, when we'd get married, what our life would look like 5 years down the road. I can't remember the last time I just enjoyed being with her in the moment." "Maybe that's why it didn't work out," I suggested gently. He nodded slowly. "Maybe." After we finished eating, we decided to explore the neighborhood. Westbrook had a charming main street with independent bookstores, vintage clothing shops, and a record store that Matt couldn't resist checking out. We spent nearly an hour in there, flipping through vinyl and reminiscing about the music we'd loved in college. "Remember that road trip we took senior year?" Matt asked as he examined a Beatles album. 4 days, 3 states, and that playlist you made that we listened to on repeat." I groaned. "Please don't remind me of my music taste back then. Are you kidding? It was the soundtrack of one of the best weekends of my life." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows down the streets of Westbrook, we found ourselves walking along a riverfront path. The water reflected the pink and orange sky, and joggers and dog walkers passed us by. It felt like we'd stepped into someone else's daily routine, visitors in a life we didn't lead but could imagine. "I've been thinking," Matt said as we paused to watch a group of ducks swimming near the shore, "about what you said earlier, about always looking ahead to the next thing." I waited, watching his profile against the sunset. "I think I've been doing that my whole life," he continued, "following this script that was written for me before I was even born. Good grades, good college, good job, good wife." He trailed off, kicking at a pebble on the path. "But what if that's not what I want? What if I don't even know what I want because I've never let myself consider alternatives?" "That's the thing about scripts," I said. "They're just suggestions. You can improvise." He laughed at that. "Is that what you've been doing? Improvising?" I thought about my life, the career shifts, the relationships that didn't fit conventional patterns, the choices that had sometimes confused my family. I guess I have been. Not always successfully, but at least authentically. We found a bench facing the water and sat down, watching as the sky deepened from orange to purple. The first stars were becoming visible, and lights from buildings across the river created shimmering reflections on the water's surface. "Can I tell you something?" Matt asked, his voice quieter now. "Something I haven't told anyone?" "Of course," I said, turning to face him. "I've been thinking about quitting my job." He said it quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "I hate it. Have for years, actually. The money's good, and it impresses people at parties, but most days I feel like I'm slowly dying inside that office." "What would you do instead?" I asked, not questioning his desire to leave, but genuinely curious about what he wanted. He smiled, looking almost embarrassed. "Promise not to laugh." "No promises, but I'll try," I teased. "I want to teach. High school math, specifically." He looked at me, gauging my reaction. I've been volunteering with this tutoring program for underprivileged kids, and it's the best part of my week, every week. I come alive in those sessions in a way I never do at work. I could hear the passion in his voice, see the way his eyes lit up talking about it. Matt, that's amazing. You'd be an incredible teacher. Yeah. He seemed genuinely uncertain. My parents would think I've lost my mind. Taking a massive pay cut to deal with teenagers all day? But it's not their life. I reminded him gently. It's yours. We sat with that thought for a while, watching as more stars appeared in the darkening sky. The temperature had dropped slightly, and I found myself wishing I'd brought a jacket. We should probably start heading back, Matt said eventually, though he made no move to get up. It's getting late. I nodded, but neither of us stood. There was something special about this moment, this place, this conversation. Something I didn't want to end just yet. Thank you, Matt said suddenly. For what? For this. For not minding when I missed my stop. For being someone I can talk to about the real stuff. He turned to look at me directly. Do you know how rare that is? To have someone you can be completely yourself with. I didn't know. In a world of casual connections and surface-level conversations, the people who see us, really see us, are precious beyond measure. That goes both ways, I told him. You've always seen me. Even when it wasn't easy. Even when it would have been simpler to walk away. Matt smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Never even considered it. We finally stood, making our way back toward the train station. The streets of Westbrook were quieter now, with restaurants still bustling but shops beginning to close. As we walked, I found myself thinking about the strange serendipity of the day, how a missed stop had led to this meaningful reconnection, this adventure neither of us had planned but both of us needed. Back at the station, we checked the schedule. There was a train heading back to our part of the city in 15 minutes. We bought tickets and waited on the platform, standing closer than necessary against the evening chill. We should do this again, Matt said as the train approached. But maybe plan it next time? There's this hiking trail outside the city I've been wanting to check out. Look at you, planning adventures now, I teased. Who are you and what have you done with the real Matt? He laughed, bumping his shoulder against mine. Maybe the real Matt is still evolving. Maybe we all are. The train arrived, doors sliding open with a mechanical hiss. We found seats together, settling in for the journey back. As the train pulled away from Westbrook Station, I looked out at the neighborhood that had been the backdrop for our unexpected day together. I knew I'd return someday, but it would never be quite the same as this first visit, this accidental discovery. The ride back was quieter, both of us tired but content. Matt fell asleep briefly, his head nodding forward, then jerking back up in that familiar train sleep pattern. I watched the city transform outside the window, suburban areas giving way to more densely packed buildings, lights multiplying as we approached the heart of the city. When we reached Matt's actual stop, the one he'd missed hours earlier, we both stood. I'll walk you out, I said, following him to the doors. On the platform, we faced each other, that slightly awkward moment of saying goodbye after a meaningful encounter. Today was, Matt seemed to search for the right word. Unexpected, I offered. Perfect, he corrected, pulling me into a hug. It wasn't our usual quick, back-patting embrace, but something longer, more meaningful. As the train doors closed behind us and the train pulled away, we stood there on the platform, making plans to meet again soon. Not just vague, we should get together promises, but actual dates and times. Because sometimes it takes a detour to remind you which connections matter most. Walking home from the station that night, I thought about how easy it is to get caught up in the routine of our lives, to forget to look around and notice the people walking alongside us. How a simple missed stop can become an opportunity if we let it. How friendship, real friendship, isn't about convenience or similarity or even shared history, but about seeing each other clearly and choosing to keep showing up. The next morning, I woke to a text from Matt. Thanks for the adventure yesterday. Same time next week. I'll try to miss my stop again. I smiled, typing back. Can't wait. But maybe this time, let's miss it on purpose. Because sometimes the best journeys are the ones we never planned to take, with people who don't mind going along for the ride. Total_char_count. 18,721.